Good evening. You're watching the Chucktown Wind Report Extended Weekend Outlook from Thursday, November the 12th through Monday, November the 16th. Okay, looking at your surface map on the screen, here's our cold front that drew in from the west just below this very large, very powerful upper level low pressure system that moved into the southwest United States and slowly made its way up to the Great Lakes region. So this is a product of El Nino with the way that the jet stream pattern was earlier in the week. Remember, we had a split in the jet stream where the subtropical, the Pacific jet coming up into the southwest United States, moved this upper low up over the Great Lakes where it joined with some cooler air pulling down from Canada in around it, and it really got a chance to blow up with some cooler air pulling aloft. That is now sliding off to the east along with its cold front, its associated cold front, which was not able to make very much of a good connection in the Gulf of Mexico. It pretty much fizzled out just west of us, and it should be pushing through our area tonight. Right now we have a little bit of a west-southwesterly zonal flow just ahead of it, and that should die off by later tonight. And as we get into tomorrow, we have a very large ridge of high pressure moving in from the west. So we would consider this what Bill Walsh would call a dome of delight. And thanks to Bill Walsh at Live 5 News for all he does. I do like that term, dome of delight. It will bring some cooler air with it and some northerly winds. These northerly winds around the high pressure as it comes across the Tennessee Valley will start off with the northwest winds tomorrow and slowly start to clock north into tomorrow afternoon. We start to get more of a north wind into Saturday, maybe even north-northeast. And then by Sunday, we get northeast, possibly east-northeast into Sunday. And as we get into Monday, the winds slowly start to edge more east-northeast to east. So this high pressure is going to be it's going to be growing in size. So it starts out now as 1,024 millibars, which we can see here. This high is going to be sliding to the east, and then it's going to be taking a jog to the north of us and then sort of parking right here for a little bit, and then very slowly moving out into the Atlantic. This is going to be a very large dome of high pressure, very strong, about 1,035 to 1,038 millibars. And this is going to have a heavy impact into what happens next week, where we have a very strong gradient. And we'll get into that in a little while. We're going to talk about some wave activity that was coming up on Surfline and Magic Seaweed for late next week. So just a heads up, our winds will be slowly clocking over from northwest to northeast to east-northeast as we go from day to day through this weekend. The gradient looks to be rather tight since the high pressure is going to be building. Whatever's left of this coastal trough from this cold front that is going through our area will remain in place. We'll have just weak troughing off of our coastline to even near coast. It'll be enough for a gradient to build over our area, so we'll see day to day low to mid teens tomorrow, building into mid to upper teens from Saturday and into Sunday and even into Monday. So the more northeast or east northeast that wind goes, the tighter the gradient gets along the coast, especially on those backdoor sea breezes that I always talk about, where we have some of that cooler air blending with the warmer land, and we get a little bit of a sea breeze oscillation along the coastline, and that's able to give us some upper teens, especially on those east-northeast leans. So we'll have to sort of take it day to day, but I think as we get into Sunday, we'll start to see a little bit of a stronger gradient build along that northeast flow. And then that easterly flow will go right on through next week. This high pressure is going to park out there in the Atlantic, and it's going to create a pretty strong gradient for our area as another large low pressure sets up for next week to come up towards the Great Lakes again, very similar to this pattern, but even stronger. We call these type of storms that we see up in the north the November witches. And this is a very typical pattern where you see warm air struggling to maintain to the south and cold air diving down from the north. So let's take a look at the GRE on radar. Here's our very powerful upper level low that we're seeing over the Great Lakes now, just heading to the east of Lake Ontario, just above Lake Ontario, and starting to head east-northeast across the southern Canadian or southeastern Canadian provinces, and that should slowly work its way out. In the meantime, let's take a look at the water vapor loop, and we can see the dry air being pulled in down below it into our area, and what is left of this cold front is just sort of streaming east-southeast to, west-southwest to east-northeast. That's what's giving us our little bit of a westerly flow tonight. We have a west-southwest or westerly flow, meaning some low teens, maybe even some mid-teens pulses as that gradient kind of in and out. So that will continue to be the norm there. Let's take a look at some of the winds up in that area. Here's our data scope from WeatherFlow, and we see lots of 35 to 40 knot winds pretty much going through the day today. I've converted this to miles per hour just so you can see some of the higher gusting that we saw this afternoon, actually early this morning and even into this afternoon. Lake Michigan, our news sensor there at Saugatuck Pier, I was kind of ranting about that one earlier because it was catching some very good winds, and this one's been pretty solid all day long on the eastern side of Lake Michigan there. We have 35 to 40 knots pretty much sustained all day long. Some gusting into the 50s. We had our highest gust at this point was about 60 miles an hour at about 5:15 this morning. So that was pretty significant. I think the highest gust that I could find, I looked through this entire area today, and as this low deepened, this station here, Harrison Dever Crib, just east of Chicago, it's a buoy offshore. We caught a 70-mile-an-hour gust at about 3:45. I think it was about 3:45 a.m. and it's been going pretty strong all day since. So some significant winds up that way. Probably some, not probably, but definitely a lot of power outages up there. Trees down, a little bit of wet snow to start. Most of these temperatures have maxed out. They're cold temperatures, and we're getting sort of a westerly flow now down below that low, and probably getting 45 to 50, 46.7 degrees Fahrenheit in some of these areas. So we're getting about 45 to 50 degrees. So no more snow for this area, but very high winds. I mean, we're seeing 39 miles an hour here to Hamburg, and this is in Lake Erie, and you can see the winds are climbing there now just south of this upper level low. So just some pretty significant areas of wind going on up there just below this, what we call November Witch. All right, now let's go down to our area down in Charleston, South Carolina. We let this data scope load. Looks like it's lagging just a little bit here. And we'll zoom into our area where we can see these westerly winds. These green arrows and these yellow arrows are our weather flow stations. The green arrows are our hurricane network, and then the yellow arrows are our typical sensors that we have installed all around the coastal United States. So here we have 13 knots at Folly Beach Pier. We have 12 knots in Charleston Harbor. And let's take a look at the details for Charleston Harbor to see what we have going on for a forecast. Zoom in on this. All right, so here's our GFS guidance for our winds for this weekend. So for tomorrow, you can see here on Friday where the winds start to sort of clock over to the north, and even from the northwest over to the north by late tomorrow afternoon into the evening. As we get into Saturday, they lean out to the north-northeast. As we get into Sunday, a little bit more northeast. Monday, east-northeast over to east, and so on and so forth. As we get into Tuesday and Wednesday, some interesting things start to happen. So this is just our GFS guidance on the models. If you do use Wind Alert, iKitesurf, iWindsurf, any of those products, we do highly encourage you to look at the entire model suite, not just the quick look or the GFS, but look in our immediate feature for the NAM, the North American model 5 kilometer, and that will give you an immediate 24 to 36 hours, and then you can look at the NAM 12 kilometer. That takes you a little bit further out, and then, let me back up to the NAM 5. There we go. So that one goes out through Sunday 1 a.m. NAM 12 kilometer takes you out just a little further into Monday, and then as we get into the lower resolution models, the GFS, that will take you out an entire week. So these are just for guidance, but it gives you an idea of what our wind pattern is going to be like. So I want to take a look at next week. Here's our jet stream. This is starting on Sunday. So right now our jet stream is more west to east. We have general west to east flow going on. As we get into Sunday and Monday and Tuesday, we get a serious dip in this jet stream along the west coast of the United States. So here's Sunday. As we get into Monday, you see this dip coming all the way down into Southern California and even just touching the northern Baja area. This is where the Pacific jet meets, and El Nino effects start to come into play as the sea surface temperatures are much warmer there, and we'll get a warm air injection into the southwest United States once again along that dip in the jet stream, and it'll force a lot of this activity to go straight to the north and head up towards the Great Lakes, similar to what we saw just recently. And this is going to really crank down through the United States and hold. This dip in a jet stream is called a Rossby wave, and when we see a severe dip in the jet stream of this magnitude coming all the way down into Mexico, it's definitely something to watch because it causes some really severe weather to form just ahead of it as these low pressures develop in the middle. You can sort of see this little hook right here. It looks like it's going to oxbow off. A lot of times you get these upper level lows that get trapped in the middle here, and they really force a lot of air out ahead of it. So we're looking at a pretty strong gradient coming into our area and a severe thunderstorm line ahead of that. So we'll have to take a peek there as we go into time. This is all sort of down the road. This is 5-6 days from now, so it's not set in stone. We always have to keep that in mind that anything can change between now and then. But for general guidance, something this significant, it usually means that there's definitely something that's going to occur that's pretty strong. We have a severe dip in the jet stream. Looking at our GFS modeling, the surf reports, I had a question last night about our wave activity, and it looked like they were showing 9 to 10 foot waves on 11-second periods late next week. And that's usually when I see something like that, I will think about tropical systems developing somewhere to our south. When we see a large swell like that, sometimes you get a combination of things. You get tropical activity to the south, and then you get strong high pressure ridge to the north, and then a very strong cold front approach from the west, and you get all three of these systems sort of converge in the southeast region, and that gives you a high swell period. Your primary swell may come from one direction, secondary swell another direction, but either way, it looks like those models have come down a little bit. I'm looking at Magic Seaweed one right now, and it looks like for Friday they're only calling for 3 to 4 feet at, let me see here, 12 seconds, 4 feet, and then 3.5 feet at 12 seconds for the east-southeast. That's going to be working off of that very strong high pressure still into next week with that east-southeast wind. So if we look at the wave watch model, I'm going to go ahead and run this one. And this starts today at 9 o'clock in the morning, and it runs all the way through. And we see as time goes on, this is getting to the 14th, the 15th, the 16th, the 17th, the 18th, and we'll stop it here on the 18th. And you can see where the swell is starting to build just north of the Bahamas. Now, the GFS was picking up on some tropical activity developing down here in the Bahamas and sending some swell up our way. However, that model has backed down a little bit on the tropical activity, so we can't say just yet if that's going to happen or not. As we get into the 19th and 20th, these models keep it right around 3 to 4 feet, and some of this activity is really just more associated with an east to west gradient. You can see these winds really cranking up 20, 25 knots, even 30 knots in some of these wind barbs down here. And so that's kind of what we're looking at. Even if we check another model, we can get the global wave ensemble and run that one as well. And we're getting to the 14th here. We get the 15th, the 16th, the 17th. Here's the 18th and the 19th. And you can see that blob growing down there where that gradient is. And that's really what it's all about for this event, is just a high wind gradient driving the swell from east to west. So I think those models might be right on for about 3.5 to 4 feet based on the criteria that I'm looking at right now. It would take something significant to see 9 to 10 feet. Not out of the question, but right now I'm just not seeing it. And if we look at our global forecasting system, GFS modeling, here we go. We're going to start on Friday for tomorrow. And as we work into time, I want you to watch this high pressure to our west. As it heads to the east and starts to grow, you see this number here, 1,034 millibars. And that is going to come right over North Carolina. This is what's going to have a lull in our winds as we get into Saturday and Sunday. We're going to see that gradient sort of pulse in and out as that center comes closer to our area. But as it starts to jog to the north and get away from us, that's when the gradient will start to come up again, and we'll see this high pressure really building. And we're talking 1,036 millibars way over here. So we could be at 1,040 to 1,048 in the center out here off of the Delmarva coastline, and really driving in a heavy-duty southeast wind into our region. So that's what we're looking at for Wednesday, and even as we go into Thursday, you can see this very powerful low starting to come together across the central United States and heading up towards the Great Lakes, and you can see all this high storm activity, severe storm activity developing in between this high and this low. So that's what we're looking at for next week. It's sort of long-term out, but I kind of like to look at these models for these significant events, especially when a very strong high pressure ridge, very similar to a Bermuda high, just sort of sitting out in the Atlantic as a blocking pattern, and that creates a very strong gradient along the southeast and eastern mid-Atlantic coastline. So that's one thing to always keep in mind with these very strong high pressures offshore, especially when they stop and become a blocking pattern, is we tend to get a very high wind event. So I think that will do it for the Chucktown wind report. And once again, as a recap for tomorrow, we'll still say low to mid-teens northwesterlies. We may see a few higher pulses in the harbor over those open areas that are not shadowed by land. And then as we get into Saturday, we start to see more of a northerly wind, and that's where the winds are going to pulse in and out as that high pressure parks right over North Carolina. And then as we get into Sunday, that high pressure sort of eases out a little bit further to our northeast, and we get a stronger northeast gradient off of that. And as we get into Monday, where this high pressure is really starting to build and park out off of the Atlantic Ocean, where we get a very strong east-northeasterly gradient along our coastline. And then into Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, pretty much all next week, we'll have to really watch what's going on there. I think we're going to have a fairly strong wind event, and what that means also is high beach erosion, waves, driving currents. That's going to drive our high tides up. Our high tide anomalies have been higher than normal for the last couple of months, especially with all the rain. A lot of flooding events going on, so it's always something to be very concerned about when you get a strong easterly gradient or even northeasterly gradient driving the waters into the coastline repeatedly day to day. And we have to continue to monitor it, because the high tides always end up being higher than they normally are, and the low tides as well, for that matter. They end up not peaking out at the lowest possible number in the table. They end up being a little bit higher by even a foot to 2 feet sometimes. So that will do it for the Chucktown Wind Report, and I will try to get back to you on Saturday or Sunday if anything significant develops between now and then. Have a good night.